a lot of people, when they don't have any strong hobbies or any particular affinities towards a category, they tend to choose what's quote unquote sexy, the stuff that does a lot of volume on Amazon. And I actually push people towards the unsexy products.
What is up, my friends? Welcome to the Millionaire University podcast. I'm your host, Brian Guerin, and on this episode, we are talking to a guy who gets to have his piece of the Amazon cake, and he gets to eat it too. His name is Corey Ganim of CoreyGanim.com, and he runs a seven-figure business selling other people's products on Amazon. That's right. He simply buys brand name products at wholesale prices, and he resells them on Amazon at a profit. Who knew, right? So Corey's out there crushing it, and I can't wait for him to share with us just how he does it and how the wholesale business model works on Amazon. Class is in session. Let's go. Corey, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I think we got a lot to talk about here today, so I'm looking forward to diving in.
Yeah, I'm excited because this is, honestly, what you do is very unfamiliar to me. And I really want to get introduced to it myself, but even more so our listeners, because I think this is a pathway to entrepreneurship that maybe a lot of people have questions about or are curious about, but have absolutely no clue how to get into. So we're going to unpack that with you today. Alrighty, so I understand that you got into selling on Amazon via retail and online arbitrage, but you started hitting some roadblocks in those departments. Why don't you take your origin story from there and lead us into the deep, Corey?
Definitely. So to even back up an additional step, so I really started selling on Amazon by selling used books. Now, this is an avenue and I guess a business model that's still totally legitimate today. And it's something you can do with a lot less startup capital. So for example, I was going to every thrift store in my town, scanning these used books that were on the shelves. Most thrift stores have hundreds of them, buying them for 50 cents, $1, $2. And some of these textbooks will sell on Amazon for $50 or $100, sometimes more. So even before I got into the really more so online arbitrage, I was doing the used books flipping, which again, totally viable model in 2024, but more of a beginner method. So after I got into the whole used books thing, I actually had to move to Chicago. This was very shortly after college graduation. And I didn't have a car, so I had no way to go to thrift stores. I had no way to continue to source these books in any efficient manner. So I was like, okay, I like this Amazon thing. How can I continue to do it, but maybe not be books be the product here? So I found what's called online arbitrage, which is the simple act of buying products from retailers like a Target, like a Walmart, like a Dick's Sporting Goods, stacking a lot of different discounts to get products at a very steep discount and then flipping them on Amazon. So for example, Dick's Sporting Goods might be running a 20% off sale site-wide, and then I can find a discounted gift card that I can buy at 10% off. And then, hey, there's a cashback website that's offering an additional 7% cash back just for checking out through their link. Next thing you know, you're getting 35, 40% off retail, and it's selling on Amazon at a premium, and that's where you make your margin. So that's how I got into online arbitrage.
All right. So you almost went the Bezos route of just flipping used books.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's a great way for people to start that don't have a lot of capital. Definitely slower to scale, but very high ROI and very low barrier to entry there.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So let's keep going on that. How did you then start getting into the wholesale side of Amazon? Was there a course or a coach or a mentor, or what kind of led you into this area?
Yeah, so this was, I guess it was late 2018 that I discovered wholesale. I didn't even know that it was a viable model because there really weren't that many people on YouTube or on Instagram talking about it at the time. In fact, there was only 2 guys. But I stumbled upon the model. It was a YouTube video by a guy on YouTube named Watch Me Amazon, Larry Labarsky. He has since become someone that I interact with. He was actually the only course I ever bought was his, and it was fantastic. But the video that kind of flipped the switch in my mind, it was a very simple video. It was him screen sharing a Google Doc. And in the Google Doc, he just laid out the economics of the wholesale business model. So the example he gave is something like this. He said, okay, so let's say you start off with $5,000 in capital for inventory. You spend that $5,000 on good, profitable inventory. You sell it on Amazon, and then you get, let's say, $6,000 back, right? Now you've got $6,000. You take that $6,000, you spend it on profitable inventory. Now you've got, let's say, $7,200. So it was very clear to me the potential for compounding here, right? It's a snowball effect. No matter how much capital you start with, you can snowball it and compound it over time. And that to me just clicked. Because the other thing that he was saying about the wholesale business model is it is very relationship focused. It is a B2B sales business at the end of the day. We're having to build relationships and sell some of these suppliers and these brands on why they should sell inventory to us. Whereas with online arbitrage, very transactional. I'm just buying from Target.com. I'm buying from Walmart.com. There's no way for me to build a relationship with Target or with Walmart. So there's no way for me to buy in bulk, get additional discounts, do the things that tend to happen in a B2B sales scenario. Does that answer your question there?
Yeah, absolutely. So you find Amazon wholesaling, you get your foot in the door there. Walk me through the very first thing you did to get started. What was your first product? Who did you buy it from? How'd you get in the door?
Yeah, so very first product, this is funny because when I tell people some of the stuff we sell, they're like, wait, you sell that? You can make money doing that? The very first thing we ever sold, or that we bought and sold in the wholesale business, was a baby stroller. It's called the Black Nano stroller, was selling probably 200 to 300 units per month on Amazon at the time. There was maybe 5 or 6 sellers on that listing. So we were able to take 200, 300, divide that by 5 or 6. And that's the first product that we found where we bought it directly from the manufacturer. I just cold called the manufacturer, talked to a salesperson. He liked what I had to say, which is funny because I had no idea what I was talking about. And we started the relationship from there.
Wow. Okay. So I've got a million questions here. I may go out of order, but let's just
listen, there's so many different directions we can go. Yeah. And it's all fair game.
Okay. So you got this first product. You mentioned that you were able to see how many people were selling it. Now, before I get to that, familiarize us with the Amazon listing. Like, are you creating listings for your products, or are there just parent listings where everything is, and do all the sellers pair into that listing? How does that work?
So that's a great question. And that is the entire premise of the wholesale business model, is that we are selling products that have built-in demand. We're not having to create a brand from scratch or market these brands. These are brands that customers are already searching for and already buying on Amazon. Think Head and Shoulder shampoo, think cosmetics, skincare, big brands that people are already buying. So I'd say 99.9% of the time, we are just piggybacking on an existing listing for these products on Amazon. So to use that baby stroller example, this brand, they were established on Amazon. They had listings for all their products. That particular listing for that black baby stroller was selling about 200 to 300 units per month. So all we had to do is basically procure the stock, which we did directly from the manufacturer, and then list it for sale under that specific listing. And on Amazon, so you talked about the competitive sellers, the 5 or 6 other folks that were selling that same product. So on Amazon, the name of the game is winning the buy box. And now the buy box, for those of you that are just completely unfamiliar with how Amazon works, it's exactly how it sounds. It's the box that has the add to cart or buy it now button in it. You see what I mean? So at any given time, there could be a different seller in the buy box, and the seller that wins the buy box, it's usually predicated on price and delivery time. So if your product qualifies for Prime and you have the lowest price on that listing, more than likely you're going to be in the buy box. And so when a customer clicks add to cart or buy now, they're buying from you as opposed to the other 5 or 6 sellers on the listing.
No way.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I think so. That's crazy because otherwise there would be 400 listings for this nano stroller from 400 sellers or 200, however many it is. And that would be chaos.
And think about it, that's how eBay operates. If you were to go on eBay and buy this same stroller, which you can, if you type in the name of the stroller or the brand name, there's going to be 20, 30, 50, 100 different listings for the same product. Whereas on Amazon actually takes the opposite approach. They have one listing, typically in a perfect world, one listing per product, and all the sellers have their offer under that particular listing, if that makes more sense.
Okay, mind blown. So let's talk about how do you ensure that you are the one that's in the buy box?
So like I said, well, I guess technically there are a lot of factors that go into winning the buy box. In fact, Amazon has never come out and said, hey, this is how you win the buy box, because it's their proprietary algorithm. But it's pretty well-known knowledge that the 2 main factors are price and delivery speed. So as long as your product qualifies for Prime shipping, which means it's going to get to the customer in 1 or 2 days, so very quick delivery time. I only buy
Prime, so yeah.
Yeah, me too. And 2, if you have typically the lowest price on that particular listing, then as long as those two factors are in place, more than likely you are going to win the buy box. That doesn't mean you're going to stay in the buy box. Chances are you're going to rotate in and out of the buy box along with the other sellers that are also prime eligible and lowest priced. But generally, you're going to be in the buy box a good amount of the time.
Okay. So your shipping time, that's like you just tell Amazon, hey, I guarantee it's going to be there within 2 days. But to ensure that price part of it, how do you stay on top of that? Or is there a perpetual race to the bottom? How do you or Amazon prevent that?
So, and listen, there are some newer sellers or more unsophisticated sellers that in order to stay in the buy box, they're undercutting everybody by a penny or by 10 cents or by a dollar. And next thing you know, nobody's making any money and therefore the listing is no longer profitable. However, most sellers that are serious, especially sophisticated sellers, they're using a tool called a repricer. Okay, so a repricer is a tool that is going to automatically and instantly adjust your pricing based on the competition. Now, a good repricer is not going to undercut the other sellers. A good repricer is going to maintain your price within a range because you can set like a minimum price and a maximum price and price in between that range. So that way you're not just constantly undercutting each other and killing the price. And now the one that we use is called Seller Snap. It's not cheap. It's $500 a month, but it paid for itself in about 48 hours because it was making us sales at higher prices than the buy box. So sometimes you can even make sales above the buy box price. There's a lot that goes into it.
Okay. I took us down a bit of a rabbit hole there, but I had to know. So I want to zoom back out a little bit. Let's go back to where we were talking about the products. We talked about your first one being that baby stroller. How does somebody wanting to resell on Amazon, how do you decide what products to get? And then I want to get into how you actually get them. Yeah.
So, I mean, listen, my best advice, because that's a very common question I get is, hey, Corey, I want to start wholesaler. I want to start selling on Amazon. What should I sell? And my advice is always, well, what do you know? What do you like? And what brands are you familiar with? Because again, the name of the game here is reselling existing brands that have built-in demand on Amazon. And if you are, let's say, a car enthusiast, and you know all about cars, then it's going to be pretty easy for you to identify the automotive brands that are in demand or that are up and coming, for example. So that would be the direction I'd push you. A lot of people, when they don't have any strong hobbies or any particular affinities towards a category, they tend to choose what's quote unquote sexy, which is toys, supplements, beauty products, like the stuff that does a lot of volume on Amazon. And I actually push people towards the unsexy products, things like tools, automotive, industrial, the stuff that people just aren't as interested in selling, which makes it, in my opinion, a bigger opportunity.
Okay, so the advice is more of niche down a little bit because there's riches in the niches.
100%. I've actually put out a good amount of content on these unsexy niches that are actually huge. I mean, for example, there's a tool that I use to gather pretty granular data on every category and every subcategory on Amazon, of which there are tens of thousands of subcategories, by the way. But to give you an example, there's a subcategory of marine two-way radios that does 2.5, I think off the top of my head, it was like $2.5 million per month just in that subcategory. And it was like 100 or 120 brands in that subcategory. So there's a seven or multi-seven-figure business to be built just in the marine two-way radio subcategory, which again is one of probably 50,000 subcategories on Amazon.
Right. Wow, that's fascinating. Two-way marine radio. Riches.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Yeah. Okay, so now let's say you pick a niche or you pick a product or two that you want to target. Where do you go get them? I know you mentioned earlier you talk directly with the manufacturer is the best way to do it, but how did you bird dog this?
Yeah, so I mean, really it is that simple, right? It's a very simple process. I recommend people start by, let's identify 50 brands in a niche that you want to get into. So once we find 50 brands that sell well, that seem to have a decent level of competition, not too much, but not too little. Because if there's too little, then there's probably no opportunity. But if there's too much, it's probably going to be saturated. So it's identifying those first 50 brands and literally just reaching out to them, calling them or emailing them. I'm a proponent of calling because I think it's an easier way to differentiate, but calling them on the phone and saying, hey, my name's Corey Ganim. I own a retail business here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I love your product XYZ. I'd like to order 100 units at wholesale. What do I need to do to get set up with you guys as a retailer, right? Some line just like that. And if you call 50 brands, 40 of them are probably going to say no. 10 of them are going to say yes. Of the 10 that say yes, 2 or 3 are probably give you pricing that's going to be profitable to sell on Amazon. So the name of the game is contacting those first 50 brands.
And there's one thing I picked up. It sounds like you literally shared your script, which is awesome. I think it sounds to me, because I've done a lot of this in my career, is the fact that you mentioned a number of exactly what you want. I'm guessing that when it comes to these products that these brands put out there, some of them may have many, many multiples of products, and they probably get tons of these calls a day, just like I get spammed to death in my LinkedIn and my email. Like, I'm sure they're no different. So was you mentioning exactly what you want and the number and the product? Is that the best way to differentiate yourself besides calling them on the phone, which not many people do these days?
100%. I'm so glad that you touched on that point in particular, because this is something that honestly, people that follow me on social media are probably so sick of hearing me say it, but I shout it from the rooftops because it's a fact. It's like, you've got to be specific. You've got to know exactly what you want, because if you don't, you sound like the other 273 Amazon sellers that called that brand that week. And I can say this from personal experience. For my first 2 or 3 years, when I'm calling these suppliers, and it's so cringeworthy to think about this pitch, but it's like, I'd call them up. I say, I want to open a wholesale account. They're like, okay, well, great. What are you interested in? What do you want to buy? And I'd say, oh, well, we're going to look at your pricing and we'll buy anything that's profitable. And if I'm on the other end of that call, if I'm that supplier, I'm like, okay, this guy he's going to waste my time. He has no idea what he wants. He's not serious. Hang up.
Right.
And my close rate was probably 5% as a result. But once I started getting a lot more specific and a lot more intentional about exactly what it is that I want to buy, which, by the way, takes 60 seconds of research going into a call. It's not that hard. When I was a lot more specific and said, hey, I see you got your top 3 products are XYZ. I'm actually interested in products X and Y. I want 150 units of each. I'm ready to buy today, assuming pricing makes sense. Who do I forward my purchase order to? Framing everything through the lens of, I'm looking to put money in your pocket today. How quickly can I do it? That they're going to take you a lot more seriously.
It's basically the shut up and take my money approach, right?
Yes, because I'm not asking them for money. It's like I fell out of the sky and I called them up out of the blue. They have no idea who I am and say, hey, I want to put $5,000 in your pocket today. You think that they would be just like ecstatic for that to happen. And so, I mean, that's the approach that I take.
Well, and tell me if I'm wrong, but probably the people you're contacting at these companies are in sales or distribution or whatever. It's their job to sell more of their product, but they have to sift through a lot of crap to find the people who are serious about doing it. I'm sure most of these brands are fairly protective about who they let resell, and it's way easier to get the attention. Like, gosh, if I had $1 for every person who came to me and said, I need a website, this is what I'm looking for, and I need Google ads, I'd have just a couple dollars, because so many people come at me and they're like, I have no clue what I need, but I need something.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you come to me, money ready, you know what you need, and I can provide it, yeah, let's talk. Like, that's the way to go.
100%. And you hit on another really good point, is that like, people listening that aren't familiar with this business, they might think, well, if you're ready to buy, wouldn't you be able to close 100% of these brands? Like, who would not want to sell to you when you have money and you're ready to spend? Well, you hit on the exact reason why, is because a lot of these brands, at least good brands, are going to be very protective of their brand, and they're going to be very selective with who they allow to sell their products, especially on Amazon. And the reason for that is because, I hate to say it, but Amazon sellers suck. Like, they're a dime a dozen. And I literally posted this on LinkedIn today. I'm like, listen, 99% of Amazon sellers, brands and suppliers, they hate them because they're not serious. They're poor communicators. When it comes time to buy, they ghost or they don't respond for 3 days at a time. They're just not sophisticated. So if you can differentiate yourself and show that you are serious and you are ready to buy, you're not going to close 50, 60, 100% of these brands, but you're going to close a lot more than 5%, right? So it's all about positioning. That's everything.
Yeah, and these brands, I'm sure the majority of them sell D2C on their own, but
a lot of them, yeah.
But their audience is also on Amazon, which is why they know they need to be there. So do these brands, it sounds like they don't try, or maybe they try and they suck at selling their own brand on Amazon. Is that why they come to someone like you? Is it a whole nother ballgame to sell on Amazon if you're a D2C brand and you know you need to be there? I have some experience that in the past, but I want to get your opinion on that.
Yes, and you hit the nail on the head. It is so the way I like to describe it is this way. These brands, And the brands that we're typically selling, like, yes, we sell some Procter and Gamble brands and these big, massive brands. But in general, the sweet spot are these brands that are doing 30K a month, 100K a month, some of them maybe a few six figures per month. But the sweet spot is these small to mid-sized niche brands. And the reason that's a sweet spot is because these brands are not big enough to have a dedicated Amazon channel manager or an Amazon department. Because the reason they got to where they are is because they're really good at creating products and building brand. But selling those products on Amazon is an entirely separate skill set, an entirely separate beast. And so they don't have that expertise. It's way easier for them to have one or a small handful of people like myself that know the platform, that know the nuances, and can sell and represent them in a good light on Amazon, instead of just having anybody and their mother who wants to sell their product on Amazon sell it.
It's the same reason that a small, medium, or heck, any size business, they would hire a marketing agency or marketing company to handle their marketing portfolio, because it is a completely different skill set from typically the business owner, the brand creator or the founder, whoever. They might have a small staff, but unless they have expert marketers on staff, they typically need to go work with expert marketers who have their own company that provide that service. It's no different with selling on Amazon. It's like you're basically an agency that helps these brands sell on Amazon.
Exactly. And there's so many different ways to go about it, right? But one thing I like about our model, and I had this conversation with the brand yesterday, we locked down an exclusive on their top 5 products, is that our pitch is like, guys, I'm not going to charge you to market your brand on Amazon. In fact, I'm going to spend my own marketing budget on ads on Amazon, because guess what? I make my money on the sale of the product. In fact, I'm going to pay you to do this because I'm buying your inventory. So it's such a win-win, and incentives are aligned, because the more I advertise, the more sales I make, the more I grow the brand. Obviously, the more money I'm going to make, which in turn is going to put more money in the brand owner's pocket because I'm the one buying the inventory. So there's a couple of different ways to go about it. Not every wholesale seller will operate that way when working with brands, but we do, and it's worked out well so far.
So I'm going to hop back. I glossed over the question I have around pricing. So you find these brands, you differentiate yourself by saying, I want product X and Y, I don't need Z. Here's the unit count I want. Can I see your pricing on that? When you get that pricing, what are you looking for when it comes to getting the right price? Do you have a way to know exactly if this unit, they're going to sell it to you for $42, you can sell it for X on Amazon? What do those numbers look like? And do you get brands that come back with just outrageous numbers that you're like, I can't make this work? What do you do then?
Yeah, so 2-part question. So I'll answer the first part first, in the sense of like, how do we know what our margin's going to be, or how do we know how much we can sell the product for? So again, the way that Amazon works, it's a marketplace. So there's buyers and sellers, there's supply and demand. So we only can, well, I guess we can see historical pricing of a product, right? So we might be able to say to the brand, well, hey, typically the product sells for around $25, but in the past it's sold for as low as $20 and sometimes for as high as $30. But today it's selling for $25. So a lot of times I'm going to do my analysis on that today price, the $25 sale price, but I need to build in a buffer knowing that, hey, if a bunch of guys jump on this listing, it might dip back down to 20. But if a lot of guys sell out and supply dwindles and demand stays the same, well, then it might jump back up to 30. So I'm always doing my analysis, my profitability analysis based on the current price as well as based on historical trends. So that's the first part of the question. Second part of the question, sorry, what was the second part again?
How do you decide if the numbers they're giving you are going to be fair to you?
Right.
And what do you do if they're not?
Yeah. And listen, this is common because there are plenty of times where a brand gives you pricing and you look at the listings on Amazon and you're saying, well, hey, the pricing they're giving me is close to what it's selling for on Amazon, right? Like it's basically they're offering me retail pricing. So at that point, it becomes a negotiation, right? At that point, sometimes I'll go back to them. A line that I love to use that works very well is, well, hey, I see you offer me this price. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be profitable at that price. How many units do I need to buy to get to X price? X price being the price that I need to be profitable. And sometimes they say, well, hey, you've got to buy X amount, right? And at that point, I need to decide if I'm willing to buy that much. And other times they say, well, hey, we can't go that low. We can't make that work. In which case I might pivot to saying, understood, well, would you mind connecting me with a distributor that services my area? Because sometimes these distributors are even able to offer slightly better pricing than the manufacturer themselves for a number of reasons. And it's also a way to pick up some additional suppliers by saying, hey, well, give me your distributors And these distributors also carry tons of other brands.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you about distributors in a second, but is there a way to do, let's say they give you a price, you can't quite be profitable at it. You go back and say, what's that number in bulk that I need to buy to get to that price? Because I could see where the risk in that to you is, all right, now I got to buy 500 units of X product. And you mentioned the price maneuverability sometimes can dip. So I could imagine you could get stuck with 300 units when the price is below profitability for you. But you got your price from the distributor, but now the price on Amazon isn't where you want it. So is there a way to do like a junior order or like a starter order where you don't have to take on such a high risk, but still be able to get your price or at least close to it?
Well, totally. And this is something that, we do all the time. In fact, I always advocate that, especially newer sellers and really anybody that's working with a supplier for the first time, place a test order, right? And now if that means, hey, I'm not going to be able to quite get the price that I need because my order is just a test, it's a smaller test order, but I place that order knowing that, all right, this is an investment in the relationship, assuming the product sells well, assuming I'm at least able to make something. Well, then I now have the data and the comfortability to go back to that supplier and say, hey, now I can do that bigger order. Now I can get the pricing that I need. Now we have some sort of a relationship where, hey, maybe we can even scale this thing further in the future. So you're always doing kind of a risk reward analysis in your head of, well, hey, do I need to break even on this first order in order to unlock the ability to work with this company long term? If that's the case, then that's an investment and a risk that I'm willing to take.
In that vein, do you have, or maybe it's a really simple math equation, do you have a tool or an equation that tells you that, okay, at this price, I can achieve this profitability? Almost like a basic profitability tool that you're like, you just plug it in and be like, boom, yes, this is the price, this is the product, let's go.
Oh, yeah. And there are a bunch of tools like it. So the best one out there at the moment is by Smart Scout. So Smart Scout is a data tool. It's actually the exact tool that I mentioned earlier that I use to pull out all that subcategory data, subcategory information. And they recently, I think as of a month ago, came out with a completely free Chrome extension, free for the first 1,000 uses, that does that profitability analysis. So for example, you're on the Amazon listing, Chrome extension pops out. All you have to do is type in your buy cost, and it's going to factor in the Amazon fees, the shipping fees, all the fees associated with selling that product, give you your ROI, your margin, and your dollar profit. And that's my tool of choice right now.
Yeah, because I figure you have to have something that can quickly just tell you, like, yes, you're going to get this price. Here's the profitability. It's basically a yes or a no, right? Like that
Exactly.
makes your transaction easy.
Yep. It's all, and again, at the end of the day, it's all numbers. Like you've got to take the emotion out of it because there are products leads that come across my desk where I'm like, I'd love to sell that product. That's a cool product or that's a cool brand. But if the numbers don't make sense, it's not a charity.
Yeah, exactly. We're running a business here.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned the possibility of buying from distributors. So help me understand this. There's the manufacturer, there are distributors. In my mind, the distributors are the ones doing the selling, but that's not the case. You're the wholesaler. So a manufacturer would sell at a certain wholesale discount to the distributor. And then is this just adding an extra layer of markup for you, or is it actually easier?
So let me even describe, I guess, the role that distributors play. So when I say manufacturer and when I say brand, I use those terms interchangeably, right? Brand is usually just easier to say. So for example, the brand is the company that creates the product, right? Think of like Nestle, right? Nestle's a manufacturer. Nestle is going to have a network of distributors that they sell to because it's way easier for Nestle to sell to, let's say, 20 distributors in huge quantities than it is for Nestle to sell to 10,000 different retail stores across the country. You see what I mean? Right. So while yes, these distributors are technically an additional, I guess, level in the supply chain, you got to consider the fact that these distributors are buying at such massive quantities that it is impossible for you to get the same price from Nestle that the distributor is getting from Nestle. Therefore, the distributor in turn can oftentimes offer you a better price than you would get if you were buying directly from Nestle. So especially when you're selling these big brands like a Nestle, like a Procter & Gamble, like a General Mills, you have to go through distributors because General Mills is not going to answer my phone call. I'm sorry, they're not. Yeah. And so buying from distributors is definitely a little different of a beast than buying directly from the manufacturer because, like you said, manufacturers, they care about their brand. They care about who's selling their product. They're selective. And there's always somebody that can outspend you. So a lot of times when talking to brands, the size of your order isn't always going to be what gets you the opportunity. But on the other hand, distributors, They want to make money. They want to sell product. They don't own the brands. So unless the brand owner tells them, hey, you're not allowed to sell our products to e-commerce sellers, which a lot of brands do, but unless there's that restriction in place, distributors care about two things. How much money are you going to spend? How often are you going to spend it? So that line that we used earlier of, hey, I want to buy X amount of units and I'm ready to buy today, that is even 10 times more effective when dealing with distributors.
Okay. So it sounds like you might prefer to work with distributors rather than directly with a manufacturer of a brand?
Actually, I like to do both. And I think, because again, both models are going to have pros and cons, whether you're working directly with the manufacturer, whether you're working directly with the distributor. I think a good wholesale business on Amazon has a mix of both.
Diversify.
Exactly. I mean, I would say our business is probably 25% buying directly from the manufacturer and 75% is buying through distributors. Because again, we sell, for example, a lot of Procter & Gamble products. I just don't have the ability or the buying power to buy directly from Procter & Gamble. So if I want to sell these products, my only option is to buy through a distributor.
Okay, gotcha. So this leads to my next question, logistics. I am really curious. I'm sure our listeners are very curious to know, okay, so you've contacted the manufacturer and or distributor. You've placed an order. In your business, what happens next? Do they ship to a warehouse of your own? Do they ship to Amazon? What are the people like? Do you have a lot of people on your team handling all this? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so we could go a few different directions here. So just to even zoom out a little more, when it comes to selling on Amazon, there's two ways to do it. There's FBA and there's FBM. FBA stands for Fulfilled by Amazon. When you sell FBA, your products qualify for Prime shipping. This is what allows your products to qualify for Prime. And so in order to sell FBA, you've got to send all of your inventory to Amazon. Amazon stores it in their fulfillment centers. And then when a customer buys an individual product from me, Amazon then ships that individual order out to the customer. Because think about it, if I'm doing FBM, which stands for Fulfilled by Merchant, which means I am personally hand packing every product myself, if I'm selling FBM, how is Amazon going to guarantee that I can get that product to the customer in 2 days, right? It's not going to qualify for Prime. I hope that makes sense without going too much in the weeds there. But again, my business model is FBA. So we've got to send everything that we buy, we've got to send to Amazon first. So when we're buying, when we're placing an order from a manufacturer or a distributor, a lot of our suppliers will go ahead and ship straight to Amazon for us. So for example, we placed an order yesterday. It was a large order, about $140,000 for these water filters that we buy directly from the manufacturer. And the manufacturer just ships them straight to Amazon. We never see them. We never touch them. Amazon tells us when they got them. And then once Amazon has them, customers start to buy them and they start to sell. So it's very hands off. Now, we also work with some suppliers that don't do that. For whatever reason, they're not willing to ship directly to Amazon. They say, hey, Corey, you've got to pick it up yourself or you've got to get it shipped to your warehouse. And in those scenarios, we work with a company, it's called a 3PL. It stands for third party logistics. And think of a 3PL as your outsourced warehouse. So I buy from supplier ships to 3PL. 3PL labels each product and essentially forwards the product to Amazon. In which case, same thing, same process. Amazon receives it. Once Amazon receives it, then customers can buy it from me. When a customer buys it from me, Amazon ships them their order. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that was going to be one of my questions was FBA versus FBM, because in a former life, we attempted to sell things at the company I was at on Amazon, and it was a disaster. It didn't work, and it was up to me, and I had no clue what I was doing. Like, I needed you. I just didn't know you yet. But the fulfillment by Amazon makes way more sense. And possibly for some people, the FBM makes more sense. That's cool, whatever. I mean, if you can't offer Prime, unless it's a very, very specialized product, I can imagine it's going to be hard to sell it.
Yeah, and there is a lot of nuance to it. And again, I know we want to keep it high level because I think a lot of people in the audience aren't familiar with the nuances of the business. But suffice it to say that FBM makes sense for very large, bulky products. Because in order to send stuff to Amazon, obviously Amazon's going to charge me to ship stuff to them, and their fees can be pretty expensive. So when it comes to big, bulky products, think like furniture or just anything large, it's typically going to make more sense to sell FBM, where me, Corey, is going to pack up each individual unit and ship it to the customer myself, right? Or, an employee.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your team. How many folks work with you and work for you? What does that look like in terms of procurement and for getting product moved? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so right now we've got 2 employees. So it's just me and then 2 employees. And both of those employees are based in the Philippines. So one of them is our head of operations. Her name's Griselda. She works about 50, 55 hours per week. She pretty much runs the show, does everything that needs to be done from an operations perspective. And then we've got an admin named Ralph, also in the Philippines, 20 hours per week. He's doing a lot of the blocking and tackling for Griselda so that she can focus on placing orders, restocking products, maintaining relationships with vendors, all that good stuff.
Wow. Okay. So that's an awfully lean operation.
Yeah, we try to keep it lean.
Yeah. And just, we're all about abundance here at MU. So was there a certain company or organization or people you used to acquire your talent? It sounds like from overseas in the Philippines.
No, so it's funny. I actually got very lucky because Griselda has been with me for, I guess, since November of 2019. So about what, is that 4.5, 5.5 years? I don't know. Yeah, coming up on 5 years. Ralph's been with me for, I think, coming on 2, maybe 1.5 to 2 years. But how I found them is there's a website that I love to use. And I've hired over 20 virtual assistants over the years through the site. It's called onlinejobs.ph. And so the .ph, right, it's a Filipino domain. And it's basically a very large job board website for folks in the Philippines looking for virtual employment. So what you do is you go on onlinejobs.ph, you create an account, you post a job posting, you're going to get 100 to 200 applicants at least. And then it's on you to filter through, interview people, and go from there. So Online Jobs acts as the platform. It's on you as the business owner to vet and test and source and hire appropriately from there. Right. And that's how I found both of them.
All right. So very lean operation. Let's talk some nuts and bolts here. Let's get nitty gritty with margins. What are the margins like in a business like yours? What's industry standard? What are you guys at? And what's your ultimate goal in terms of profit margin?
Yeah. So industry standard for wholesale at scale. So when I say at scale, I mean 7 figures or multi-7 figures per year at least. Net margin, and this is net after all expenses, but before taxes, a healthy wholesale business is doing 5 to 8% net. So definitely a lower margin business, which is why you got to keep an eye on your operating expenses and make sure that you're buying good inventory. In general, I would say, I think lifetime, so over the 7 years that I've been selling on Amazon, I think our lifetime net margin is right at 5%, which is on the lower end. But keep in mind, we've outsourced all of our logistics to a 3PL. We have a team that essentially runs the whole business. So I mean, we could get closer to that 7 or 8% net figure if we wanted to, but I'd probably have to start doing a lot more work myself, probably have to take some of the stuff that we've outsourced to, say, agencies and 3PLs in-house. And I'll be honest, I'm pretty lazy. So I'm fine with 5% to really not have to work that much on the business at all.
Wow. So coming from the info world, like 5 to 10%, that sounds really low. But when you're dealing in, and last year you did about 3.2 million in revenue. So at the end of the day, that's not bad for net, speaking net wise, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And to add to that as well. So again, my salary is an operating expense. I pay myself a 6-figure salary, which is for tax purposes, not smart, but it is what it is, right? So I'm saying even after my salary is accounted for, we still have about 5% net. So if I were to take a much lower salary or no salary at all, because I have income coming from other places, we would be at that 7 to 8% level, if not slightly higher at times.
Wow. Okay. And then the growth of your business, are you continually looking for new products, new areas, or do you kind of have your stable of go-tos and you keep buying, procuring, and selling? What does that look like for you?
So that is definitely one of the beautiful parts of this business is that, well, I'd say it's a double-edged sword, right? When you're starting a wholesale business on Amazon, it is a slow start. It takes a while to build momentum, to create relationships, to prove to suppliers that you're trustworthy, that you know what you want, that you're a consistent buyer. So I'd say the first year to 2 years is a grind. You're really trying to prove yourself to some of these suppliers. But after I'd say that 2 to 3 year mark, assuming you're iterating properly and scaling properly, it actually gets a lot easier because today in our business, we buy from the same 3 to 6 suppliers that we've been buying from for years. I mean, none of our current suppliers we've been buying from for less than a year, except maybe one that we picked up this year that actually reached out to me on LinkedIn. So, which is a huge tip. Start posting on LinkedIn if you're not already in the Amazon space.
Join us there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so again, I mean, we are largely buying and selling if not the same products, the same brands. Because products come in and out. Somebody will jump on a listing and kill the price. And it's like, okay, well, that product's dead. But hey, let's find another product from that same brand. So a lot of it is replenishing what we've already sold, maintaining relationships that we've had for years, and then occasionally adding a new supplier or two strategically, not because we need to, but maybe to have as a backup, or maybe because we're targeting a specific product or a specific brand.
So what does your product portfolio look like right now then? Do you have hundreds and hundreds of products, like anything from toothpaste to strollers? Or are you focusing more on clothing? Are you more like you started with baby strollers? Are you still in the kind of the larger purchase type of products? Or is there still plenty of margin to be made by selling toothpaste on Amazon?
Yeah, so our business is definitely a little unique in the sense that we have a very high ASP, which stands for average sale price. So our ASP will differ from, it might be anywhere from $40 to $45 on the low end up to, it's gotten as high as $60 or $70 on the high end. So because we're selling typically higher ticket products at higher dollar profit margins, we only carry, I think, on average, probably 60 different products at any given time, which the average wholesale business has an average sale price of $15 or $20. They're selling these very cheap, low ticket products, but they're doing a ton of volume, but they've got hundreds of different SKUs, sometimes thousands of different SKUs to maintain that high level of revenue. So again, I like our model a little more and targeting those higher ticket products because again, when you're only managing 60 different SKUs, it's a little easier to manage than managing, say, 600, which plenty of people do.
Absolutely. So can you give me an example of one of the higher end or larger products you sell? Can you give an example of what you buy it at wholesale and then what you sell it at? Or like what, if we were to go look at Amazon right now, what it would be selling for approximately?
Yeah, definitely. And let me even pull up my numbers here because I don't want to be way off because somebody I'm sure will roast me if I'm off by like $10. So there's a very high-end brand of water filters that I mentioned earlier that actually is our best account. Took me about 3.5 years of follow-up to land, but these are high-price products. So for example, this one product right here, it's a bundle of this brand's products. We're buying them for $270.71 per unit, and we're selling them for $484, making a 26% gross margin,
wow,
46% ROI. And again, this is before returns are factored in. So once you factor in returns, ROI is probably in the 30 to 32% range, and margin is probably around 20%, which keep in mind, this is like a unicorn account, which is why it took 3.5 years to land. But when you're selling more expensive products, those types of margins aren't unheard of. But when you're selling $12, $15 products, that's not going to be as realistic.
Using this example, when you were targeting this whale and it took a little while to land, was there a way to know how many units they were selling? Like for you to even know that it was a big seller to target? Yeah,
because the tool that I mentioned earlier, right, that Smart Scout Chrome extension, that'll give estimates of units sold per month. And now also in 2024, as we're recording this, within the last few months, Amazon themselves on some of their product listings, I'm sure you've seen this, have actually given sales data where they'll say, for example, 500 plus units bought this month. Have you seen that badge?
Yeah. I always thought that was just Amazon maybe just blowing smoke. Like, hey, here, we sold 500 of these. Like, how do I know if that's true or not? Of course, they could make that number up, but is that pretty darn accurate then?
Yeah, so it's pretty accurate. So that number is not going to appear on every listing. I think they're slowly rolling that out across the catalog. But, for the first 6 years of my Amazon career, that number didn't exist. So we had a lot of third-party data tools like that Smart Scout Chrome extension that I mentioned that will estimate sales, that'll give us a ballpark. But I mean, those numbers can be off by 20, 30, sometimes 50%. But now that Amazon is giving that data, it's much more accurate. And again, based on, I can see my sales data, I know exactly how many I've sold, and then I compare it to that badge on the listing, and it's spot on.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so Amazon, maybe they are being honest with you.
Well, at first, this is actually a funny story. So at first, when they first rolled out this feature, it was way off. Like, I don't know if there was something wrong with the algorithm or what. So there was one listing, it was for a Harry's razor, replacement razor, that Amazon said, this was right when they rolled out this feature, it said, 10,000 plus units bought in the past month. And I was like, this product's crushing it. Like, yeah, I think we bought like 2,000 or 3,000 units. Come to find out, we were selling 150 or 200 units a month. Luckily, we made a profit, but we sat on those much longer than anticipated because the data just wasn't quite accurate yet.
Okay, so they may have worked out some kinks. The Bezos Brain Trust might have figured that part out and got a little, a little more in tune with it.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Awesome. And I just wrote this note down because I forgot to ask this earlier. But what about sales tax? I mean, I know as a consumer we pay that, but are you subject to tax? And if so, how much? Because I imagine that that could really hurt your margins, but with how much product you buy.
Yeah, and so I'll preface this by saying I'm not a tax professional nor a CPA. So for those nuanced questions, definitely consult your professional. But so and I'll tell you the sales tax story before and after. So when I started selling on Amazon, up until I think this was the case up until through maybe 2020 or 2021, Amazon would not collect sales tax on behalf of their sellers in most states. So for a while, the onus was on me as the seller to collect and remit sales tax in all of the states where I'm making sales and all the states where I qualify to submit a sales tax return. And as you can imagine, this was a freaking nightmare, complete nightmare, where there were tools, for example, like TaxJar that automated a lot of this process for at least for some states. But I remember in 2021, going back and forth with my CPA for months about, well, hey, you made X amount of sales in the state of Missouri this quarter, so you got to register as a retailer with the state of Missouri, and now you got to submit a sales tax return every month for the state. And it's just like, oh my God, is this even worth it? But slowly over time, Amazon has, I don't know if they partnered with the states or how they've approached it, but basically now in 2024, Amazon both collects and remits sales tax on behalf of every state in the country, for sellers on behalf of every state in the country. So now I'm only registered as a retailer in my state where my business is incorporated, which is North Carolina, as well as any states that I am shipping inventory to directly. So only the states that my 3PLs are located in, because suppliers are going to ask for sales tax information about the state that they're shipping to. But this is all to say that us as resellers, we don't pay sales tax, because the end consumer is the one paying the sales tax. Because it's not, think about it like if we were to pay sales tax as the seller and the customer pays sales tax, the state's getting double tax. That's not fair. So we're basically passing the tax burden off to the consumer, that's retail.
Right. That's the point of it. And I remember I was managing an online store, an e-com store, when that law, it was like South Dakota something, when it shifted and went into effect. I remember we were like freaking out. We're like, we seriously have to register if someone buys from us in Montana. Now we got to file a return in Montana. Like, I wasn't there for too long managing that store. I moved on to other things, but I remember that we were like, holy crap, like this could become a huge disaster. And then we asked the same question, like, is it even worth it? So thank goodness Amazon kind of figured that out for you.
And it's funny, I got a letter in the mail last week from the state of Missouri for $42 tax burden that we owed them from first quarter of 2021.
Yeah.
So it's just, some of this stuff is still not fully resolved. I'm like, man, this is just, it's killing me.
Imagine that. The government's waiting 3 years to tell you about a tax problem worth $40.
And it's like, oh, by the way, you've got 10 days to pay it. It's like, great.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the state side and government side of things, are there requirements that you have to have for your entity to, like a licensed reseller or like a pass from the state that says, hey, you're now able to buy direct from manufacturers or distributors?
So not necessarily. Really the only, I guess, licensing you need, again, if you want to avoid paying sales tax as a reseller, which you should, otherwise you're paying more for no reason, you're going to need to register with your state Department of Revenue as a retailer. And when you do that, they're going to essentially give you a sales and use tax number, and it differs by state, but they're going to give you documentation that you then provide to the person you're buying from that says, hey, I'm a reseller, so I'm sales tax exempt. And then aside from that, it's really just, companies aren't going to sell to you. They're B2B, right? So they're not going to sell to you unless you're a business, unless you have a business entity with an EIN number and all that good stuff.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I imagine being the manufacturer, just these large scale distributors, you want to make sure who you're doing business with is actually legit. So that makes sense.
They're not going to sell to just Joe Schmo off the street that doesn't have a business entity.
Right. You got to be formal. So,
yep.
All right, so I want to talk about, we're running up against time here. I want to make sure I honor your time, but I'm curious about any mistakes or lessons learned or struggles you've encountered running this style of business. What have you seen and what have you learned from it?
Yeah, so biggest struggle in a business like this that's very capital intensive is going to be cash flow management. That really is the name of the game, is being able to manage cash and credit and not overextending yourself. And also being able to extend yourself to where you're fully invested without overextending. So I would say one of the biggest learning lessons for me came in, it was like mid 2022, where we were having one of our best sales months ever. We were selling a ton of product, but come to find out, we owed a little more money than we had cash in the bank. We were able to get through it no problem, but it was a wake up call for me. And that's like, hey, I can't just be buying everything that comes across my desk, even if it's profitable, because we can be profitable, but if we run out of cash, we're still going to go out of business. So getting a handle on the finances was the biggest wake up call for me. And a book that really helped me get a grasp on that's called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. Love that book. And so I read that book, and ever since I read it, we have implemented that. I think we started Profit First January 1st of 2023. And ever since then, it's like managing the finances is 10 times easier. And we're able to take more profit out. We got money set aside for taxes. We know exactly how much we can spend on inventory. It's so much cleaner if you can be disciplined with that.
Yep. I operate Profit First in my business as well. And I have my CPA and bookkeepers. They're all certified Profit First. Yeah.
Yeah, mine too. Yeah, I love it.
It's the best way to go. So a little plug for Profit First. Go check out that book. It was a game changer for me in my business. Sounds like the same for Corey.
The beautiful thing about that book too, so there's the original Profit First, right, by Mike Michalowicz. There's also an e-commerce specific version by, I think her name is Cindy. I don't remember her last name. So there's Profit First, and then there's Profit First for e-commerce sellers. Either of those is going to get the job done.
Love it. Love it. All right. So what do your days look like now? Sounds like you have a lean, mean team that's handling a lot. What are you focusing on these days, and what are you doing to move the business forward? Or I know you have a lot going on the content side of the world.
Yeah. So, I mean, really these days, I'm very blessed with my team there in the Philippines, right? Griselda runs the show. Ralph handles a lot of the back end. I honestly spend less than an hour per day on the Amazon business itself. The extent of my responsibility there is simply signing off on purchase orders, right? Because again, a lot of the time it's a lot of capital that goes into these products. These are big investments. So Griselda will do everything from teeing up the purchase order saying, hey, I think we should buy this, where all I have to do is look it over and say yes, no, or change this. And then she places the order, she arranges the logistics, she gets the products to Amazon, and I don't have to do anything else. So that's, again, the extent of my responsibility on the Amazon side. Now, the rest of my day is spent on the content side. Like you said, that's something that's been a much bigger part of my business over the last year and a half, creating content for YouTube and my podcast as well as written content on Twitter, LinkedIn, emails, etc., building up my communities, building up my other businesses as well. So it's never a dull day over here.
Right. So are you focusing on the growth of your wholesale business, or is it more so you're good where you are and you're going to keep slowly adding to that, and focus more on the content, or is it a little bit of both?
So a little bit of both. I'd say when it comes to the wholesale business, I am of the mind now to where we're letting that grow organically. Now we have the contacts, we have the suppliers, we have the access to product where, like, if you handed me $1 million in capital to spend on inventory, I could have it spent within 2 days. That's how many opportunities we have. But personally, I just don't want that level of risk when it comes to having literally all my net worth tied up in baby strollers, for example. So my strategy right now is just to let Amazon continue to grow organically. I don't need that to be an multi-8-figure business. We'll just let it continue to grow on its own. And then a lot of my focus is on growing my audience, growing my communities, which is an entirely separate business in and of itself, and doing a lot of that fun stuff as well.
Okay, very cool. Well, let's round it out with that. What are the best ways? You mentioned you have a podcast. I want to drop the name of your podcast, and then the best ways for any listeners who might want to reach out and find their way into the world of Corey Ganim.
Yeah, so the podcast, it's called the Amazon Wholesale Podcast. It's available on any platform. It's also available on YouTube. And I've been running it for just over a year now. There's, I think, 56, 57 episodes you can binge from day one. And every single week I sit down with a successful wholesale seller and interview them on what's made them successful, tips, tricks, tactics, all that good stuff. So again, that is the Amazon Wholesale Podcast. And then for anybody that wants to get in my world and get associated with me, best place would probably be over on YouTube. I'm just at Corey Ganim on YouTube.
All right, beautiful. And one last piece before we let you go. What is the top piece of advice you have for entrepreneurs who are out there listening today, who are doing the thing, or maybe they're in the process of getting started, or they're still dreaming about starting their first business?
The best piece of advice I could give would be increase your time horizon. So there's a really good quote that I like that says something along the lines of, you underestimate what you can accomplish in 5 years and you overestimate what you can accomplish in 1 year. Because, for example, I thought year one of doing wholesale, I was like, oh, we're going to sell $1 million. This is going to be great. We're going to crush it. Turns out it took 3 years to hit 7 figures in revenue in a 12-month period. So really what I found is 2 to 5 years of really focused effort on the stuff that moves the needle is kind of the sweet spot to like truly see things start to happen. So take however long you think it's going to take, double it, and that's probably more realistic.
That's right. Get rich quick is not a real thing.
Nope. And if it is, it doesn't last.
Right.
Usually.
It's fleeting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Corey, man, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you, man. I really enjoyed it as well.
All right. Wonderful. You take it easy, brother.
You too.
All right. Let's hear it for Corey. Man, talk about a lean business model with 3 people on the job, 3.2 million in revenue in an industry that you're playing where everybody is. All the consumers are on Amazon, right? It only makes sense that a business could possibly profit tenfold from having their products listed on Amazon and then being on the inside, being a reseller, being a wholesaler on Amazon is an incredible way to make money. So thank you to Corey for stopping by, filling up our knowledge buckets to the brim. I hope all you listeners out there got some piece of information. I think for me, the biggest part was just learning how Amazon operates and that, yes, it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. Very few things like that would actually work. But if you can get in there, you can develop these relationships, get your foot in the door at certain places, you can start growing this business to 6 and 7 figures and beyond. So I want to round this out today. If you guys haven't checked us out and gotten your free business course from Millionaire University, hit us up. It's millionaireuniversity.com/training. We're going to give you that first 7-step framework to get your business started and off the ground. And then once you have that moving, you can pair your knowledge with episodes like this to learn how you can keep the ball moving and take your business to the next level. All right, that's it for me today. Brian Guerin signing off. I will see you back on the next episode of the Millionaire University podcast.